Hi all. I'm just would like to go over how to create a timeline um, video using Photoshop. This is one of our assessments that's coming up, and I'm just going to try to cover that very quickly with you if I can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over to my Photoshop document, which I have already set up. And when you're doing this kind of thing, keep it really simple. You don't want to have a ton of layers. That can become very confusing. Also, make sure that you name your layers. That's really quite important when you're working with an animation. Yeah, so let's get cracking. Nice and simple, several layers, not too many layers, just nice and simple. I'm going to need to open up my timeline, and that's the first thing I need to do. And here we are. So you want to make sure that this feature is set to video timeline. I'm already set to go. And I'm going to hit this big button here on the screen here like so. And boom, there we are. There's my timeline. Now, when I do an animation like this, what I would strongly suggest is that you convert each of your layers to smart objects. That's going to allow for a higher level of functionality, in that it will allow me to rotate elements, scale elements, as well as opacity and position. So, as I say, very good idea to convert each of your layers to smart objects. So I'm just going to rush through and do all that. There we go, smart object, and smart object wherever you are. There we go, like that, beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to just work with, perhaps I might work with Mr. Lincoln first. So there's a little arrowhead on the side here, and what I'm going to do is just going to twirl that down. And you see I've got three properties to work with. Transform essentially means that I can scale and position left and right and scale any of those elements. How I need to begin is to hit the stopwatch right there, and that's going to record in this time that position. So at the start of my video, I hit the stopwatch and I get that little yellow keyframe. I'm thinking that I'd like him to come on screen just from off there like so. Another thing you might want to consider when you're doing this is to use the view to show your layer edges, because that's going to allow me to see the blue boundary box there. So I sort of know that he's there. So I'm going to bring him in. So I'm going to hit the stopwatch like only once, only going to hit that once. I'm going to advance this blue bar here, which we call the playhead, just somewhere in time here. And I'm going to use my arrow keys to just shift him in so that he sort of rolls in a bit like that. So obviously, so he's going to animate in as I click and drag that playhead. That's going beautifully. And the further these keyframes are apart, obviously the slower this will take. So that's going to happen beautifully like so. Very simple so far. Perhaps if I wanted to add an additional sort of property to this, I might say that I want to have him fade in. So I'm going to use my opacity keyframer. I'm going to come forward in time. Yep, that's going to look good. But at the very start, I'm going to have Mr. Lincoln reduced in opacity, you know, down to a small number, so that when I get on screen where I want him to be, I can increase that opacity so he sort of fades in as well as just drags in across there like that. That's nice, beautiful. That's the idea really. So I'm pretty much done with Lincoln. And the same will be true of the logo perhaps. So if I wanted that logo to scroll in, I'm going to roll down this menu here. Same goes. I'm going to hit the transform property and I'm going to tick him off to the side. He'll come in from the left-hand side. I'm going to advance my playhead and I'm just going to use my arrow keys to V selection and just going to tack him across so he comes in across at the same time. Very nice. So he's going to do this idea. So that's all pretty straightforward. If I wanted to do something with my background here, so what I'm thinking with my background, so I'm going to have that sort of rotate in. That might look cool. So I'm going to try my background now. So I'm going to go to the start. I'm going to roll that down. I'm going to hit my transform button, and I'm just going to zoom away. I'm going to have that perhaps like so. I might advance this somewhere, just in time somewhere, and Command T to transform, and I can rotate that, and I can also scale that up a little bit. I'll give it a little extra rotation just because it's a clock, it could look cool. So that now going to give me that idea as well. All right, so now I've got a decent looking little animation here. So that's looking quite good. I'm reasonably happy with that. One thing, just check that your timelines, it's not a bad idea to, you can time things up by opening up all the layers, and you can grab your keyframes, and you can, these things are all able to be modified so that it all happens at the same time. Beautiful, that's lovely, that's good work. That's essentially it. So you want to make sure everything's a smart object, and you should be good, really. Look, I'm going to zoom that up. There's my animation. Now, probably the last thing you want to do is there's a little arrow down here, and that's the render video button. So essentially, when I'm done, yep, that looks good. Essentially, when I'm done, I'm going to hit that render button, and that should, onto my desktop, build me a little QuickTime file or H.264. That's probably our preferred format. That's a MP4, that one right there. That's probably the preferred file type. We want to get our file sizes down reasonable, so that's always a smaller file type than QuickTime. So that's the guy, like that. And you can change this out. If your video gets a bit big, you can reduce the quality somewhat. And I'm just going to render that out, and that should not take too long. That'll be on my desktop in a moment. Yeah, cool. Anyway, that's rendered. It should be on my desktop. I hope that's been informative, and I'll see you in class. Thanks.